Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mouthy Money podcast. I am joined on his return today by Chris Tuite, who's Head of Consumer Finance and Director of Communications Consultancy, MRM, back in the studio after a short break. Chris, hello.
Oh, yeah, good to see you. How's it been while I've been away?
It has been very difficult and trying time without
I
you.
don't believe him, listeners.
There's not been any jokes or any fun stuff, unfortunately.
Okay, there we go. It's been all business.
So it's all business. But it's good to have you back. We've got a really, actually something that was big in the news now from where we're recording this week. It was big in the news last week, and we actually put some stuff on Mouthy Money about it, but we wanted to take a bit of a deeper look at it. So we are joined today by Cali Sullivan. Now, Cali is a campaign lead for retirement living standards at the PLSA. Cali, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, both. Looking forward to the chat today.
So I'm going to ask you a bit about your kind of background and what brought you to where you are today. But just firstly, tell us about PLSA, what it is and what they do.
Yeah, of course. So the PLSA in long form is the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association. So we are the voice of pensions in the UK, and we represent multiple pension schemes across the country, and we're a membership body for those pension schemes.
And just tell us a bit about yourself, Cali. What's your kind of your background and what brought you to the PLSA?
So background-wise, I've worked in the financial services for 10-ish years, I think. I started off in a consultancy and then moved over to the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association about 2 years ago. I'd been working on pensions for quite a while, and it's one of those topics that never gets boring. And there's just something new every day. And with the PLSA, it was nice to see sort of what they were branching out into and the different areas and the policy they're leading on, and being the voice of pensions. So that kind of led me here and into the retirement living standards as well.
I think if anything, getting even more interesting, especially with a government that seems to be taking a lot more of an active interest in how pensions work and that kind of thing. Something we've had on the podcast before, and also lots of it on Mouthy Money. So as I mentioned last week, we had some announcements from the PLSA, which Mouthy Money covered, and I actually wrote a column about it, which doing some back of the cereal packet sums, should we call them, I figured out that I'd need about £1 million in my pension in order to live a moderate retirement.
So how close are we to that, Ed?
Really close.
It's exact figures, but
really close. It's all going fine. Yeah,
a couple
absolutely.
of days' time and you'll hit the threshold, will you?
Yeah, especially with that state pension that I'm guaranteed.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Not yet, anyway.
Sorry, Kelly, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but
No problem.
You are the campaign lead for retirement living standards. And this is what we're here to talk about, because it's a big piece of work that the PLSA do, and it has quite an important implications for the pensions industry and for people at home as well. So tell us, what are the retirement living standards and kind of how does it work?
Yeah, of course. So they are a guideline on costs of retirement, and it's split down into 3 different standards. So you've got the minimum, the moderate and the comfortable, and it breaks down the spends across 6 different categories. So house costs such as DIY and things like that, food costs, transport, holidays, clothing, and helping other people. So there's 6 different baskets, and within each of those baskets, it drills it down even further. So when you look at food, you're looking at open your cupboard, what tomato sauce have you got on the cupboard? How many tins of beans do you buy each week? It boils down to literally the minutiae of your spends. And then there's a team at Loughborough University who do the research for us. So after these conversations they have with big groups of people across the country, they go away and look at all those baskets of goods, total it up, and then throw out the figure at the end, which gives us the 3 different levels. But we also, within those 3 different levels, you have a 1-person household and a 2-person household, and the difference between the 2. Obviously, you should go into retirement in a 2-person household, whether that is a romantic partner or somebody else. Your costs are going to be reduced than what you're going in on your own. Obviously, things like you're going to share the household bills. You might share the food shop between the 2 of you. So that's why we've got those 2 different figures. So the single person going into retirement on their own, living alone, their costs will be slightly higher. So broken it down into 6 different figures if you look at it that way.
Yeah. But I mean, I find the profiles very, very interesting. Like you say, there's kind of you're even talking about kind of the kind of cushions that people have on their sofa and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff that you wouldn't think, okay, well, this is going to be a cost for me in retirement, but actually it is things that people factor into their day-to-day lives. Now, with PLSA's run these kind of profiles for, I mean, I'm not quite sure, but for a number of years now.
Yeah.
Last week we kind of had, the reason it was in the news is because we've had an update to those kind of minimum, moderate, and comfortable standards, haven't we? Just walk us through some of those changes and what's happened.
Yeah, of course. So this year we saw the minimum had an overhaul, and we went back and went through all of our the research groups again. So we brought people in and had discussions on what the minimum standard looked like. And we found that this year the minimum has actually reduced slightly, and it's due to, there's a number of different reasons. One of them being that fuel costs, household fuel costs, gas and electric, has reduced slightly this year. But we also looked at things like I think the costs for helping friends or helping family, and those areas. So their expectations of costs have changed slightly. So the minimum reduced slightly this year, and the moderate and the comfortable were increased in line with CPI. So we've seen minimal increases across the moderate and the comfortable, but minimum has gone down. So we have seen that for those in that minimum category, or those who don't have quite as much at retirement, it's benefiting them a little bit with those reductions. But obviously we do it every year, so those changes do go up and down. You were talking about the basket of goods and, like you said, cushions on the sofa. One year we had, I think it was last year, one of the big things was everybody all of a sudden wants an air fryer. So that was obviously something new last year, but then in a year's time it might be the next fad might change. So it's what is really important for us to keep that independent research going with Lepra, because year on year expectations and reality and practical costs do change.
And that, sorry, just the figure that you guys arrive at is an annual figure, right? This is what you would need a year to, and then obviously people can calculate it based on their own expectations or circumstances about what their overall pot is. Is that right, Kelly?
Yeah, so it's the figures we've got are actually the cost of retirement, not the extent. Not the income you'd need. So it's how much people actually spend at retirement.
I see. Yeah, that's an important distinction. Yeah,
have a look at it backwards, but they're guidelines. So you might find that you sit in a minimum for 3 or 4 of the baskets, but actually you'd have a comfortable holiday or a moderate holiday, and you may not sit exactly in any of them. You might sit in between some of them. So the best thing to do is for people to review them, look at the different baskets, look at where they kind of sit. There are calculators out there that can help you with that as well. And then you kind of try and work out, right, well, I predominantly sit here, so this is how much I need to get saved to get to that point. And it might be different. It's a pick and mix kind of style. Everybody is different. We all have different lifestyles pre-retirement. So why wouldn't we have different lifestyles post-retirement? So it's definitely evaluate what your hopes and dreams are. You are different from your neighbour. And you were talking about the different pots to get to retirement. So if you're going into a 2-person retirement with the full state pension, you'd already have enough to cover the cost of the minimum retirement. And then any pot size after that you've saved obviously goes towards the levels. But yeah,
I think that's very interesting from that perspective of the state pension. I mean, obviously there's a lot of debate about sustainability of it and that kind of thing, but actually, meeting those costs, even for, an individual on the minimum, it's almost nearly there. There's about £1,000 in it or something. I can't remember the specific number, but I think you're not in the business of telling people, well, this is how to get to that level, are you? But once you start getting to those higher levels, and this is when I did the sums last week, actually, to generate a £40,000 a year income, you do need a fairly sizable pot to get to that. What do you do around that side of it, looking at it from?
We've done some calculations ourselves, and we've based it on, so we've got a couple where we've based it off the annuity rates, I think from April. So obviously highly caveated, this is based at like a specific point in time. But for a one person, if you're looking at that 2-person household, which is the 44,000 at moderate, or the 1-person household at nearly 44 for comfortable. So for a 1 person to reach the comfortable level, you are looking at the 500 to 800,000 for the pension pot. But what people need to think about is, are you currently in a comfortable living arrangement? So going into retirement, it's not an aspirational cost. It's a continuation of what your current lifestyle is. So if you are currently living a comfortable lifestyle, then obviously you'd want that comfortable lifestyle in retirement. So looking towards that. Whereas if you look at it from the two-person point of view, with the minimum, for example, you don't need a pension pot size at all. But when you look at the moderate level, which is 43,900 for two people going into retirement, the pension pot is between 165,000 and 250 each to put in.
Which is a bit more
but
sizable,
we do
isn't
have
it?
those figures on the website as well, so it gives people just an easier way to sort of break it down and look at the different numbers.
I think there was one important distinction here, is that it doesn't include housing. It includes things like maintenance and stuff like that, doesn't it? But it doesn't include things like rent or a mortgage. The assumption is made that the person is a homeowner. Is that right?
So it's not necessarily, so it's not just the assumption that at the moment we do see a lot more people who are going into, at this moment in time, going into retirement. They've either owned the house they have, or they've got social support. Obviously there is going to be a generational change where those figures do start to change, and people going into retirement will either have renting costs or still paying some mortgage. However, the reason we don't include it is because somebody who's renting in London is going to have a very different cost to somebody who is renting in the Midlands or in Scotland. From a regional perspective, those costs are so different across the UK. Trying to find that middle ground, people would still need to up and down how much they're putting into it. So we do advise people that if you look through the basket of goods and there is something that's not in there that you do pay for, you do need to take that into consideration as well. So housing is one of those. Just trying to think off the top of my head. Somebody who's got a pet, there's no pet costs in there. So they are guidelines.
Yeah.
They're not set in stone. Everybody's different.
So as somebody who's about to get £900 worth of procedures for his dog's bad ear, I might need to check. Yeah, no, that's the life of a pet owner, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
From the case study right here. Chris, you've had a look at these profiles. Which one do you think you want to be in?
I think if I'm being realistic, as we know, I'm a little bit sort of, speaking of pets. Sorry, we've got two kittens that have just been bought.
There's a cat on the podcast.
There's two. There's one in my lap. There we go. Come on, listeners. There we go.
Oh my goodness.
There we go.
Right, go away.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think I'm in the moderate. I'm sort of glass half. I don't know if it's half full or half empty, but I always sort of go for that kind of middle ground. So I think that's what we're aiming towards. I'm one of those who lives in London, so, expensive housing costs, and actually have got quite a long term on my mortgage. So that would push me maybe beyond early stage retirement years into that. So, there's looking about overpaying and things like that in order to make sure that. So that will all have to line up, I think, and there's a bit of thinking to be done around that. But yeah, I don't have expensive taste. It was interesting you said, Cali, about dialing some up and dialing others down. I think the holiday thing is always been a fan of travel. So it's like, well, I'm probably going to go on a few cruises, right? All that kind of good stuff. So what does that look like? So, but these give good kind of indications about what it looks like now. I'm also mindful of the fact that it's a good figure to then take and then make some assumptions about inflation over a period of time, and gives you a figure to kind of point towards. And we've used other calculators in this series, haven't we, to kind of talking to the likes of Guide and others about what that can look like. So there's lots of great tools that are out there to help us. But it's nice to have these figures to feed into that, because that was a bit of a blind spot for me. So to answer your question, Ed, I think moderate. I'm not going to be looking to do anything too flashy, other than occasionally, boarding a cruise ship.
You were saying about being in London. Do you drive a car?
No, actually, I'll admit it now to everyone. I don't have a driving license, Cali.
You won't need the car.
Sorry.
So you won't need the car.
Well, we do actually have a car, but my wife has it. But it's I grew up in Zone 2, so me and all my friends didn't learn to drive. We're kind of a weird anomaly around the country. It's like, well, the tube will always be there, and you're like, oh, hang on, cars are actually useful. But I'm 42 now, so.
But that's one of the things you can sort of go up or down on. So with the minimum, there is no car. It's reliant on buses, and there's a taxi cost in with the minimum, because sometimes say, for example, you've got a hospital appointment and the bus might not get you there on time. There's an allowance for taxis. Whereas the moderate, there's I think it's a 3-year-old car changed every 7 years, and the comfortable is a 3-year-old car changed every 5 years. So although you sit in the moderate, there's some people who do live in London who might sit in the moderate but won't have that car. So they're on the minimum for the car allowance, but they might be the comfortable for the holidays. So it is that pick and choose.
Well, reading how important keeping active is as we get older, my hope is that I'll still be able to cycle my bike around. Maybe I'll have to get an e-bike, but those line bikes are expensive as well, but that's a whole nother podcast, Ed. We won't get into that.
Well, the thing I heard about with line bikes is line bike leg. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I have actually, yeah.
Sorry, this is completely non-relevant to the podcast, and then maybe for another time.
Increase my retirement costs.
Yeah, they could do. Yeah,
to drive. Anyway, there we go.
No, I mean, this is really. I think it's really what it really illustrates for me is how different everybody's individual situation is, and how hard it is. And I think what a good job you guys do to have this kind of benchmark. It's so hard to be able to triangulate what somebody's life looks like in retirement, and that really does. It is an individual thing for people, be they in a couple or on their own, or owning a home, not owning a home, needing a car, having a pet. All of these amazing variables. But I think what's so important about this stuff is actually just to get people thinking about what they might need in retirement and how could they plan to make sure that they have that number, right in their heads, and in order to achieve that for retirement, I think it's really important. So I think that's and actually, frankly, there's nobody else really doing it. The government doesn't tell us what we need in retirement. They don't provide any guidance at all. So actually, the PLSA are filling a need here, basically, that we've got to have some sort of benchmark to work on, right?
Yeah, it's really useful to have that. I think, like I said, when I've been using some of these I've been making a series of assumptions that, to be honest, I've been using Google and a combination of AI technology to try and explain what that might look like. Whereas actually, you've got a basket of goods here that I can put different amount of importance on, and so it's really useful to have that other figures, as I said, for the other end to plug in to try and make the plan line up. And that's the important thing, right, Ed? The plan. What's your plan? Are you low, moderate? Sorry, I've got the term confused there.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of you in that I think because I don't live in London, my housing costs aren't too bad. I find it very difficult at the moment with, I suppose actually you're probably the same, Chris, with a small child, and actually I've got another one on the way now, thinking about how much of a hole that puts in my monthly budget. Obviously that's not going to be there when I retire, well, hopefully, as long as
depends how it goes, Ed.
As long as my children don't become boomerang kids. Actually, that's interesting. Do you look at that at all, Cali, with boomerang kids and that kind of thing?
Within the helping others section, there is a breakdown on how much each level would spend on birthdays and Christmas or any sort of special gifts. But there's also, with the moderate and the comfortable, following lockdown and things like that, we found that people actually wanted to support their younger families or their children and their grandchildren. So we now actually include an amount in the moderate and comfortable for supporting your family. Very nice. I think I'd like to say £1,000 in both of those a year, across the year, to support your family or your grandchildren. So it is. We make sure that those conversations are had within the groups as well.
That's definitely on your choicer, Ed.
Yeah, well, definitely something
to kids. Let's get saving now.
How
is that performing?
Oh, I haven't looked. I don't want to look at the moment. Considering I set it up in January.
Yeah.
No, I think, we live somewhere where the public transport is not good. So we're definitely going to need cars probably, for the foreseeable future. There's no kind of two ways around it. I think, it's difficult, isn't it? We like to travel, but I am also a homebody, so I could probably just be happy at home most of the time. I've got family that live far away, but how do you factor that kind of stuff in? It's difficult. I don't know. There's so much that's unknowable at the moment, and you feel like, especially when I was doing my calculations for the column last week, I felt like I was almost felt like I was underestimating how much potential for inflation there was, in the future. And how do you get that sum right and that kind of thing? I guess it's difficult. But for me, the thing that I find useful is just, okay, well, have these in your mind as a starting point. And, whether or not that works out, at least you've got something to work on, basically. And that's what kind of cheers me up.
And that's the importance of it, is being able to like engage now, wherever you are on that journey. If you can engage with your pension now, have a look at like these as that guideline, have a realistic view of what sort of retirement do you expect to have? Are you on the way to getting there? And if at any point you're able to increase your contributions, increase them. If you have to reduce them back down to the minimum contribution at 8% at some point, that's like, just have a look at like throughout your journey where you can put a bit more in every now and then. Obviously, cost of living can stop us from increasing it. But it's if and when you can do that. But it's engage with your pension, speak to your, if it's a workplace pension, speak to your employer, sorry. Just know where you are on your journey is the best thing to sort of work out. Have a look at this and find that out.
Yeah. I think the other thing that was eye-opening for me as well, I think, is the differentiation between couples and single people. I think there's, it's something we haven't actually really explored much on the podcast, but, the single person penalty in life, it is difficult for people to have to pay for everything, themselves, and the numbers underpin the fact that it is quite a lot easier for a couple to make these ends meet. As you say, the moderate, you're nearly there with state pension alone kind of thing. And Chris, I don't know what your age gap is with your wife. I mean, I'm a little bit older than mine, so actually she's probably still going to be working for a few years, if and when I want to retire kind of thing.
Well, let me tell you a tale on that, Ed. My wife is Tanya, she is 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
But she's told our daughter that she's 31. So it depends. She's in for a shock then, I think, when we celebrate her 40th birthday very, very shortly. But so it depends who you believe is the answer to the question. But no, interesting is the retirement provision. Actually, I was thinking about the different parts, and you said when you put them together, I've been obviously a bit more proactive than this, and we're trying to sort of get Tanya more up to speed on it, and we've been looking at her pension. She's got a SIP and workplace pension and stuff like that, and I'm hopeful that between us we'll move it more towards that kind of moderate, comfortable level. Having two potential income streams is far more reassuring when you're doing this stuff. I think it'd be quite daunting if, like you said, you had the single person penalty and you had to kind of try and factor all this out on your own. It just,
We've done a bit of research on who people would be willing to share a house with in retirement, so not just that romantic partner. And we found that I think it was somewhere between 9 and 11% of people said they don't want to live with anybody,
right?
But everybody else was willing to live with somebody, whether that is their significant other, a family member, a lodger, a friend, whatever that may be. So obviously going into retirement as a couple, a romantic couple, you are going to completely split the costs, because chances are you'll have the same bed, you'll share the same part. You go into retirement as a two-person who are friends or lodgers, you might socialise separately, you might do a few bits separately, but the household costs you're still going to reduce. So going into retirement as a two-person, it doesn't have to be that romantic person to help save those costs. It could be a family member, whether that's a sibling or even your own child that you decide to live with. Those costs can be reduced by sharing with somebody else.
It does feel like there's a sitcom in that as well.
I was thinking, Chris? I was thinking the exact same thought. That's pretty weird.
Not the young ones, the old ones. That's a bastard. Is there something in there, I think? But we'll talk about that offline, see if we can get that worked up between us.
All right. We'll write a letter to the BBC.
Yeah.
this has been I really enjoyed this. I think, it gives so much food for thought. I think for anybody listening, we'll put a link to the Retirement Living Standards has its whole kind of own website where you can read all the info up. We've obviously got bits and pieces on Mouthy Money about it. And we'll put the link to it in the show notes, etc. I've really enjoyed this. I think it's really interesting. And, I do hope that people see the lighter side in it as well. Having the right kind of ketchup in your cupboard means that you can retire or not. I mean, we can all nitpick about that kind of thing until the cows come home.
Avocados for the older generation.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Well,
millennial,
they're spending their pension income on Heinz. They should be doing budget.
You joke about it, but I went to buy some cereal from the supermarket the other day, and you pay £5 for a packet of Weetabix these days. And you pay £2 for supermarket owned brand. That's your retirement right there.
Think about it.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop now because I think Callie's getting bored of our bad jokes.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed the bad jokes.
It's all about having a plan, though, right? Ed, sorry to cut across, but that's and the data from these guys absolutely helps for you guys, Cali, to helps us to make a plan with some. I wouldn't say concrete numbers, but some very, very well-researched numbers that give us a real good orientation. So everybody, if you are planning, make your plan. We always say that on here, but make sure that you plug the good numbers into that plan, and there's some good numbers here.
Yeah. Cali, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself today. Thank you.
Thanks, Cali.
Thank you, Chris. As ever, we'll be back again soon. Got loads coming up, actually. We've got a ton of stuff in the schedule. So do give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already, so keep up to date with what's going on. With that, thank you, everybody. We'll see you again soon, and goodbye. Thank you for tuning into the Mouthy Money podcast. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on all our content. Follow us for more on your preferred podcasting channel, including Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Stay in touch by following our social channels on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe to the Mouthy Money newsletter on mouthymoney.co.uk. The Mouthy Money podcast is produced for general informational purposes only. It should not be construed as investment, legal, tax, or other forms of financial advice. If in any doubt about the themes expressed, consider consulting with a regulated financial professional for your own personal situation. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments can go down as well as up, and you may get back less than you started with. Never invest more than you can afford to lose. For more information, visit fca.org.uk/investsmart for more. Thank you.